So, I know there's a lot going on with Doctor Who at the moment. What with the. Originally, Doctor Who, I think, was supposed to return at the end of this year for a Christmas special, but I believe that's now been pushed back to an Easter special. At least that's what incoming news reports are saying. So, in order to try and take my mind off that, I mean, I hope the Doctor will return eventually, but I'm not going to put too much of a deal on that. Let's get on with part two of my future classics. Let's finish off David Tennant's first era at least, and see which monsters or villains I think would be worth bringing back or not. Once again, two categories, whether I think they should return or whether I would consider them a future classic, and it'll once again be yes, no, or 50-50 for each one. We're up to Smith and Jones from 2007, and first up we've got the Judoon, the rhino-faced police officers and officers for the Shadow Proclamation. Pretty much the Judoon have cemented themselves as future classics by this point, and if Doctor Who's going to find a way to make these guys return, they're going to do so. I mean, they've appeared in the likes of Smith and Jones, The Stolen Earth. They went over to the Sarah Jane Adventures for Prisoner of the Judoon. They also made brief appearance in The Magician's Apprentice and came back in full with Fugitive of the Judoon and at the end of The Timeless Children. If they're going to find a way to bring the Judoon back, they're going to do so. So the Judoon, yes for a return, and also yes for a future classic. As for their rival in this episode, the Plasmavore, played by actress Anne Reid, I love Anne Reid. I have great respect for her. She appeared in Doctor Who, she appeared in Hot Fuzz as the florist, and also played Jean in the 1990s sitcom Dinner Ladies. I have immense respect for Anne Reid, but I doubt people are going to remember Smith and Jones for the Plasmavore. I mean, she did a great job as Florence Finnegan, she does a great job for this episode, but that's not ultimately what the episode is going to be remembered for. So, sorry, yes for the Judoon, no for the Plasmavore on both accounts. It's not going to return and it's not a future classic. So, sorry, no. Next up, the Carrier Knights from the Shakespeare Code. While this is one of my favourite episodes of Doctor Who, I will admit I hold the Carrier Knights in a similar position like I did in the last episode to the Gelth and the Werewolf. Like, if it's based on something that already exists within Earth folklore, you got to either do it really well or do something that provides something different from it. And like I said, the Carrier Knights work here because they are witches, and that is working well with Shakespeare. But I feel like the Carrier Knights are not necessarily what this episode is going to be remembered for. Like, just kind of all these kind of Shakespeare references and being able to film partially inside the Globe Theatre. That's what the episode is going to remember for. The grandeur, not necessarily the Carrier Knights themselves. And compare those to other Doctor Who monsters, they don't quite stand up and out. So I love this episode, but sadly it's not one that I can say. The Carrier Knights are not one that I would say. So no for both. Professor Richard Lazarus, played by actor Mark Gatiss from The Lazarus Experiment. This for me is an odd case because I guess I view Lazarus in the same way that I viewed Peter Kay's portrayal of Victor Kennedy, or what people said about Victor Kennedy and the Absorbaloff. Because I feel like Mark Gatiss does kind of just well with this kind of smirks and glances enough that he's already acting in this episode as a pretty intimidating figure, especially just when he shows disdain for other people. He can be sinister. But once they bring him out in this kind of full CGI scorpion form, that's where I kind of feel the episode falls flat a little bit. Now, Doctor Who has used CGI before, and they use it fairly sparingly when they can. I mean, if they're going to do a creature, they do their best to kind of make that creature look as realistic as possible. But with Lazarus, I feel for me, his kind of scorpion form, watching it back, did you ever believe it was really there? I'd be inclined to say no. So for me, Lazarus, Mark Gatiss was kind of sinister enough as it is, but it's a no for both of them. I wouldn't like to see it return, and I wouldn't necessarily think I'd consider it a future classic. So, sorry, Lazarus, you fall flat. Next up, the Sun entity that ends up possessing Corwin in the episode 42. This one could have potential. I mean, sentient suns that take people over, that could be rather sinister. but in terms of how it's done here, it's done well enough, but if they can make it return and make it believable, kind of sentient sons, maybe, but I'd personally say no for both of these. And 42 isn't an episode I've come back to a whole lot, so for me, it's a no on both counts. Now, you might be thinking, well, is he going to say anything positive about any monsters introduced here? We're getting there. Because next up for me is the Family of Blood. Now, this is one where I wouldn't like to see them return, but, I do think they should be remembered as future classics. Like, I remember from around this time people said that the scariest monsters in Series 3 were the Weeping Angels, which I'm getting to shortly, and that they thought the best episode, or best episodes of Series 3 were Human Nature and the Family of Blood. For me, it's the other way around. Like, I thought the Weeping Blink was the scariest episode, was the best episode of Series 3, but Human Nature and the Family of Blood, I remember being scared of these things. Like, I remember just Harry Lloyd and his appearance as Son of Mine, and just the way he acted with the rest of the family kind of made me scared of the Family of Blood. Like, I was scared of these creatures that are hunting down the Doctor, and the Doctor doesn't even know who he is. So, as I said, I wouldn't like to see them return, but I think they've cemented their places and should be remembered as a future classic. So for me, the Family of Blood, no on return, but yes on future classic. The Weeping Angels. Pretty much by this point, they've cemented themselves once again as a future classic. I mean, apparently this was kind of quite late on for Stephen Moffat. Like, he was originally going to write the Dalek two-parter set in New York. However, he ran out of time and said, no, it's alright, I'll do the Dr. Light story, because nobody likes those ones. So I'll take the hit for that one. Yet he did it, and he made it one of the most memorable Dr. Light stories ever. And it's one that people still come back to these days. Do I think the Weeping Angels have been overused? Maybe a little. Okay, but especially once he brought them back for the 11th Doctor's run and made them a recurring staple. But because of that, they've kind of become a future classic. People know who and what the Weeping Angels are. So yes on both counts. They are probably going to return, and they are a future classic by this point. So yeah. Now we come into the finale of Series 3, starting off with the future kind. No, I wouldn't like to see them return. Should they be remembered as a future classic? I'm 50-50 on them. I mean, one of them is played by Paul Mark Davis, who went on to play the Trickster in the Sarah Jane Adventures. So they've got that going for them. So, no on return, but should they be remembered? Yeah, why not? 50-50. The Toclophane, the human race kind of gone mad, reduced to creatures inside metal balls that the Master uses to take over the Earth. Should they come back? No, not really. They serve their purpose in The Sound of Drums and The Last of the Time Lords. Should they be remembered as a future classic? Not really, no. However, apparently in the early days before they probably got the rights to use the Daleks, there was a version where essentially the Doctor's greatest enemy from the Time War was due to be a series of sphere-like creatures. Apparently there's a version of the story Dalek, titled Absence of the Daleks or Creature of Lies, where the Dalek would be replaced with a sphere creature that later became the Toclophane. But, as is, no on both counts. The Host from Voyage of the Damned. No, I wouldn't like to see the return. Should they be remembered as a future classic? 50-50 on that one. I mean, to be honest, when I look at them, I personally think a bit of classic Doctor Who with the Axons, but I think they work well enough. As for their boss, Max Capricorn, I'd say the same. Like, I wouldn't like to see him return. He had a perfectly good death at the end of the episode, but will he be remembered as one of the great Doctor Who foes? 50-50 on that one. Next up, the Adipose. Now, like with the Toclophane, the Adipose did at one point in time have a much bigger role in Doctor Who planned out. Like, supposedly they were going to be one of the members of the Shadow Proclamation for the Stolen Earth until they eventually had to do budget cutbacks. Like, there were going to be adult Adipose in the Shadow Proclamation, but then they were cut and replaced with just the Jadoon. As for whether I'd like to see them return, 50-50 on that one. I mean, they did bring back a child adipose that you can see briefly in the End of Time Part 2 in the Alien Bar where Jack's waiting. As for whether they'll be considered a future classic, they're cute. Whether I'd like to see them again, if they can come with a good story, maybe. So 50-50 on both counts. The Pyrovile. Would I like to see them return? Not really, but should they be considered a future classic? Once again, 50-50. Like the Adipose, supposedly Pyrovile were going to be part of the Shadow Proclamation, but ultimately never happened. The Hath, from the Doctor's Daughter. They weren't really the villains of the Doctor's Daughter, they were more kind of misunderstood, and it's more kind of the humans that are more the villains in that story. Would I like to see them return? I would. Should they be considered a future classic? 50-50. The Vespiform, from another one of my favourite episodes, The Unicorn and the Wasp. 50-50 on whether they should return. Should they be considered a future classic? Oh, well, I kind of look at them like the werewolf, the carrier knights, and the Gelt. Like, it's basically just a giant wasp. And should they be remembered? Probably not. But I wouldn't mind seeing them return, or seeing it return, or the like. The Vashta Narada, from the Silence in the Library and the Forest of the Dead. Now, should they return? I'm 50-50 on that one, because they have only had 2 appearances in Doctor Who. Once in the episode, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, and also if you played through the 2010 11th Doctor Adventure games from BBC Games, they do show up in the episode, or story, Shadows of the Vashta Narada. So, if they can find a decent reason for them to return, 50-50 on whether they should. Will they be remembered as a future classic? Well, they had Stephen Moffat behind them and in his early days, and I think I've said before that I kind of like Stephen Moffat's writing of Doctor Who when he wasn't main showrunner. Not that when he was main showrunner he was bad, he clearly wasn't. I just kind of prefer the episodes when he wasn't the main man. And I do think the Vashta Narada are a really good idea, and they do really well in this episode, so I would say yes on future classic. The Midnight Entity from Midnight. Now, I can't honestly make a case whether this monster should return, because it technically did return in 2025's The Well. I feel if they use it sparingly, like they don't bring it back every 5 minutes, this one could technically return at a future point. Will it be considered a future classic? Yes. Absolutely yes. In the 2 episodes it had, Midnight and The Well, the Midnight Entity is scary as hell, and they've managed to do it both times brilliantly. So the Midnight Entity, I can't say for return, is a future classic? Yes. The Time Beetle from Turn Left. Should it return? 50-50. I mean, the Doctor says at the end that it's part of the Tricksters Brigade, so I feel that if other members of the Pantheon of Discord popped up, maybe it could return. Will it be considered a future classic? I'd say that depends more on the kind of circumstances surrounding it. I'd possibly say no, but yeah, that's just me. Anyway, the Stingrays from 2009's Planet of the Dead. Should they return? No. Are they a future classic? Also no. So that's that for that. And the final entry of David Tennant's first run in Doctor Who that I'm going to talk about. I know his last story was The Master and the Time Lords, but the last one I'm going to speak about here, The Flood. I found this episode, The Waters of Mars, scary. This for me was the scariest of David Tennant's final year as the Doctor. Should they return? 50-50 on that one, although apparently the Flood virus does show up in the Doctor Who comics. Like, I think I remember reading a 12th Doctor comic with Ice Warriors, where they got partially infected by the Flood. So, whether it should return, that's 50-50. Will it be considered a future classic? Given how scary I thought The Waters of Mars was, I think yes, The Flood will be considered a future classic. So there you go, that's my quick little go down the last monsters introduced in the second half of David Tennant's run as the 10th Doctor. And if I do a future classics video soon, then I'll be entering into Moffat's era and the 11th Doctor. Anyway, until next time, see ya.